everyone. This is CRTV live from Dreamforce. I have my colleagues, Doug Henshin, Diane Hinchcliffe, Liz Miller. We have been here on the show floor, in the meetings, at the keynotes, and there has been a lot, but two letters reign supreme. Anyone want to guess?
Metadata.
Those are two letters. Those are two letters, Doug.
Data Cloud, DC.
DC. It could be MD. DJ. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
That's not it.
We're swimming in alphabet soup. But listen, as Mark Benioff opened up in his keynote and said yesterday, this is one of the largest, if not the largest, AI event of the year. And that's really what Salesforce is here to talk about. But what we are here to do is cover off on what we have been hearing the most of. So Doug, I'm going to start with you. What jumped out at Dreamforce? We've had the keynotes, we've had kind of the functional keynotes, we had an analyst visionary session. What's top of mind from you coming out of this?
Well, obviously Data Cloud, that's really, and their metadata layer, Einstein 1, unifying all that data and really pushing customers to consider Data Cloud, which I think they should, certainly if they're Salesforce centric. If their world of customer data is in Salesforce, absolutely a great fit. If they're proposing it as the warehouse and the cloud for operational analyses, that's another matter. I think they integrate with things like BigQuery and Databricks and Snowflake, but home base here is Salesforce data, customer data. As David Schmer put it, it's the holy grail of CRM.
But what I really liked was that when we're talking about data, we really are talking, to your point, about the customer data. And it's customer data that comes in from across the enterprise and now also brings in, normalizes and harmonizes data from outside of the enterprise, right? So this is really trying to bring customer data into one place. Keep your other data, all the data that belongs in Snowflake and Databricks, that fast-moving analytical data that really needs to be analyzed and cut apart. You keep that where you store it. Like there's a right size for that.
No copy integrations.
There we go. No copy. It feels like that's another alphabet soup invitation.
But I think it does bring up questions. Okay, so I already have this separate data warehouse.
Right.
Why do I need Data Cloud? Well, that's for the customer data. And they, Schmer talked about having all these partners lined up because this is where the customer data is. So if the analysis gets back to customer data, great. I've talked to some customers here who are saying, I don't know about getting my operational data in there for things that aren't tied to customer data. They have a case to make there. They need more tools. They need to tie it to their vertical industry clouds to really show that they can offer value in those scenarios. But again, if it's the customer data, customer-centric analyses, that's the home base for that data.
Well, Doug, I got a question for you. So we heard David Schmer today at the analyst session, and they made it a big deal about bring your own data lake. So you can bring your own model too. Do you think that's real, that you can just pull up, if you have some of your customer data elsewhere in another lake, you can just pull that right up and start using it?
Well, yes, for the ones that are tightly integrated today, which would be Databricks, Snowflake, and Google BigQuery. And it's no copy, but they do cache data. And to my mind, you're not going to do that unless it's something that gets back to analysis in combination with customer data. So that's where it's a fit. But, a customer is going to, if they already have an incumbent warehouse and lake, they really have to question, okay, do I have enough customer data centricity in Salesforce that I want that data cloud?
But I think there's a scary question when it comes to my mind of when people start to parse, well, do I have customer data? It's also going to be about, do I have enough execution points and enough use cases that face the customer that I need this? Because everyone can find enough customer data. I mean, I can fabricate enough things and call it customer data. But the problem has been we segment customer data into something that's so unusable that it's not actually pulled into the native points of execution and that framework of execution where we're actually then delivering on that promise of experience to the customer. So I think that what Data Cloud is doing for a lot of organizations is getting them to have more specific and intentional conversations around customer experience with their data, with their analytics, and with their IT teams. Because now it's not just a matter of, I have to decide what goes into Snowflake. right? Because that was the question I heard like 3 years ago, right? Of the CIO would be like, no. Like that's not going into Snowflake. And the CMO is sitting there like, but I need it to go someplace.
Yeah. Well, the question is the operational data versus the customer data. So if you have a question that is tied to customer data, there's something at a telecom company that relates to their interactions with the phone company, their use of the network, related to their customer segment. That's a reason to tie those two together.
Yeah.
If it's purely the data of what's happening in that telecom network, you're not necessarily going to put all of that.
Telemetry data is not going into,
exactly.
It doesn't belong.
Same in energy, same in other categories. That's where companies are going to have to be intentional about deciding what is where, because costs are going to be, I think, different.
Significant.
The two.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, Diane, same question, different vantage point, because you've got two. So I almost want you to split them up a little bit, right?
Sure, absolutely.
So it's like, as the CIO listening to all of these announcements, as the CIO listening to all of the innovations, we got Data Cloud, we've got Einstein Platform, we've got now, prompt building studios that you can now change prompts, bring your own model. As the CIO, as you're looking at that, what was your reaction?
Well, it was really striking. We saw, so Einstein One Platform is the big news here this week at Dreamforce. Underneath that is Data Cloud, where you get the data from to feed your models, to empower all the artificial intelligence systems that they're bringing in. And what was really interesting is it was clearly one of the most IT-centric, most architecture-centric and developer-centric opening keynotes to Dreamforce that I've ever seen. It was really interesting to see their traditional CRM audience was kind of quiet, I thought. But this is what it takes to operationalize for AI. You have to be able to bring your data lakes, all your different models, all your databases, all your unstructured data, soon all your rich media to the table and train these models, build your copilots. So the copilots become the really shorthand for building systems that will directly assist you with applied work. So it's been big in the developer community, but we're seeing copilots now for every type of thing, marketing and sales and customer service that will help you with that specific task, almost animate your hands. And so I thought it was very, very interesting to see.
But it's changing. It's suddenly buttressing into your other area of conversation, being that future of work. Because talk about automating your hands, we're now seeing potentially copilots show up in every single type of tool you use. And they're ironically all called copilots. But let's not get into that for just this moment. But just for a second.
That is the future of work. Copilots everywhere, right? So.
Right. But so when you start to look at future of work, and you start to look out at where people are really willing to make the changes. Because I thought last year you had a conversation that I thought was so interesting, which was all the vendors are really ahead of where we want to talk about the future of work. But the people were not necessarily at that same place. Is the gap closing now because of AI and because of this data?
I think some advanced workers are definitely asking for these tools. We're also seeing boards are saying, do something, get this into our business before our competitors do. So it's a big deal. But I just did a CIO survey. I've been citing this on CRTV elsewhere, but nearly a quarter of companies are blocking generative AI because they don't know what happens to that IP, who's using it. We just saw Microsoft now is going to indemnify their users in case they get sued from what's generated by the AI. That's creating a lot of questions. And so I thought it was really smart that Salesforce spent a lot of time on trust.
And the trust layer, which I think is...
The whole trust layer.
I worry, it's funny because I really like the conversation that they're having around the trust layer. I like the thinking and the actual structure that has gone into that. I thought it was a really interesting point that they're now also saying, listen, hey, you can go in and test. And you can use, it's almost like, let's get that purple team out there. So we're going to pull the purple team up from the security basement and we're going to set them onto AI to make sure that all these models
can be really clear answers on, is this going to be safe?
Very much so.
They have this new toxicity detector. They've got data masking. They had a lot of the right answers. I'm not seeing anyone else all put in the same pile and say, if you want to trust it, we got the pieces, they're real. And they actually name the pieces in a way that no one else has. I thought it was
I think the trust layer piece has come together really, really nicely. I think that where the trust layer starts to get me a little bit concerned, and it's not concern for Salesforce, it's concern for the partners in the ecosystem. Because I think a lot of the partners in the ecosystem have been a little bit fast and loose with generative AI. They have called things their data. when, yes, it was data that flowed through your system. And at one point, someone in your team may have touched it, but it's not actually your data. So I thought Mark Benioff's statement in his keynote of our business is not your data, like that it was a very clear, succinct, we're not in here to take your data. We're just here to move it through for a second and then not make sure.
The problem is we all know this. So as IT people, as technical people, we know that it's so easy though, but all these integrations, all these connections for there to be leaks into where these ML systems are, where these models are being trained.
It's a little fast and loose, I think, in the partner ecosystem. So that's where I think that trust layer is going to need to expand.
I think they have,
and they said that,
presented a very compelling message to the C-level, to lines of business. I mean, they're talking about running a data warehouse with your Salesforce administrators. We've seen a few new interfaces, like the data graph interface, which I thought was very compelling. If you didn't see it in the keynote, but I think there is a yin yang within companies. The people in IT that are used to having a lot of great tools to have really concise control over data, over models, over governance, and we're going to see some debates within companies from the top level saying, let's get this AI, and Salesforce is going to make it easy. And the IT people that got to dig into the details and know for sure.
But I think it goes back to something that actually, Diane, you and I were talking about, which is, I think it's also going to largely depend on the size of the company and the maturity of the IT infrastructure and the maturity of where they are as a technology footprint. If you're that mid-sized, fast-moving, eager company that's just like, we're going to go, and AI fills in the gaps in whether it's workforce, whether it's in capabilities to deal with data, whether it's in delivery of CX. I think you're going to see that rapid implementation, and that Salesforce already has the bricks and the blocks and the tubing is a great fit for that. At the enterprise level, I see some brakes pumping. Right? I see some brakes pumping pretty fast.
And they're not going to run all of enterprise AI, but they said as much, right? So I think there's a lot of sales, marketing, and service use cases that Salesforce can come in and kind of coexist with our AI. I think that's the model we'll tend to see. So,
David Schmeyer spoke to it. We are the front office. He was challenged about, is the data cloud for everything? What about operational data? He said, well, we're the front office, and we're getting into that mid office where you get into order management, CPQ.
Exactly.
But by no means saying we're going to do it all.
Yeah. So let's talk about Dreamforce itself for just a minute, because we've all been to several, right? Sometimes they can be eye-rolling. Listen, I don't even think anyone at Salesforce would argue that, sometimes Salesforce announcements feel like they're a big bag of sparkly chewy candy, right? And they're like, everyone gets a car and it's all sparkly. But this year, has this year felt different to you?
Well, the comment came up in the session with the AR session, the analyst relations session we were just in, and somebody gave them, a lot of them for having real, concrete, generally available announcements. I do think they came with a lot to the table. David Schmeyer talked about smoke coming out of the Salesforce tower because they're producing a lot of software, but there's so much to do. There's more to do. The metadata framework felt a little bit like sparkly dust, but talking to product managers, they really do have a catalog. They're working on lineage. They're working on all sorts of things that are coming. So I think it's going to go beyond sparkly dust. We're going to hear about it again.
Sparkle candy. Sparkle dust candy. What about you? Is this Dreamforce different for you?
It is. Well, it was right up my alley. And having the main keynote talking about all these enterprise topics around integration architectures and seeing slides that we've never normally seen in an open keynote session that really resonate with IT and answers their questions. That was great. But I think it's a do or die moment for Salesforce. We just heard Peter Schwartz, our oldest employee, saying, there's been a bunch of inflections in the industry over the years. We've had, the client server, we've had service-oriented architecture, we had mobile, we had social, we had Web3.
Yeah.
This is bigger than them all.
Yeah.
And so they came to the stage, they know they were going to kind of bore a little bit of their core CRM audience, but this is the future, and they brought the goods. Yeah,
and I think that it's been interesting because I was walking around the campground yesterday, and I'll spend a little time in the Trailblazer Forest later, because I think that the executive track, if you looked at that pie during the keynote, there was lots of head nodding, and I think that's a big difference that I have seen, because in previous Dreamforces, it's always been like the admin trailblazer up excitement of how things got implemented across Salesforce. And it was the admins having to go in and be like, I want this, I want that, I want this. But this time it was that C-level executive track being like, I've got to go tackle this. Like, yes, I've got to go tackle Data Cloud. I've got to go tackle what's happening across sales, what's happening across, the various incarnations of the packages. So I think that they've made an interesting and smart pivot. How much of that is because of everything they had to go through this year with kind of reorganizing staff, dealing with activist investors. But I think, our colleague Holger Mueller kind of said it at the very beginning with the activist investors. Sometimes it's not always bad. Sometimes it means that you intentionally focus and you tighten your belt. And that it seems like that's exactly what happened. So I hate to admit it on a live stream, but was Holger right? That doesn't feel good at all on a CRTV episode that Holger was right. That can't
You don't need to tell him.
That can't be. But it is going to be the year, everybody. Just warning y'all that Holger's going to be spending a whole lot of time correcting. Oh, everyone says Einstein. So just know that everything here at Salesforce has an Einstein, and now Holger's coming for you on the pronunciation. Okay, we're going to wrap it up here. But so last takeaway, thing that's really sticking with you, what do you expect to see in the next 6 months, or what do you say Salesforce has to show in the next 6 months until we get another major update from them? What are you looking for now?
I think we have to see the Einstein One platform spread a little bit more thoroughly across what they're actually doing, getting deep into it. There's a lot of big announcements, but we know a lot of that stuff is not quite here yet, not ready. I want to see more proof points.
Okay.
Yeah. Mark Benioff interviewed Sam Altman, OpenAI CEO, and Sam made a comment about, nobody thinks about mobile anymore. Nobody's going to think about AI. Everybody, you just have to have AI. So their top level CXO-oriented message on AI everywhere, and this is an AI show, was pretty spot on. And they just have to deliver on that, and everything behind that that helps you deliver trustworthy AI.
I agree with both of you. I think proof points absolutely going to be critical. AI moving that forward. I think that this has been this is the pivot. Dreamforce, the last three have been building to this, right? We saw Hyperforce and platform really come into play 3 years ago. This was going to be the new ground floor, the new composable infrastructure for the entirety of the Salesforce platform. After that, we then saw Data Cloud and data coming in, that now becoming that platform that sits right on top of that. And now we're seeing Einstein coming after that. So it's 3 years of Dreamforces like a big layer cake that have really come forward for Salesforce. So in the next 6 months, what I'm looking for is making sure that Marketing Cloud now fits on platform, and that's coming up. And I know that Steve Hammond, the new president at Marketing Cloud, is absolutely looking at that and looking at that re-architecture. I had a chance to talk with him, and so I think the future is really bright for that Marketing Cloud. I think the same thing is very true of Sales and Service Cloud. We're going to start to see a right sizing of those applications. Those applications are now sitting on top of a rock solid platform and a data cloud that actually can feed that with the Einstein, so it's right sized and it's actually delivering. So lot to come in the next 6 months, but thanks for joining us. We'll have more. You're going to see next episode drop today of CRTV. Holger and I will be parking the clown car for 2 weeks to come at you with some feedback from there. But otherwise, listen, next big stop for us is really going to be CCE when we're all together again. So look out for that when CRTV